Hi guys, this is R.A. Sweeney here to talk to you about another passage from the book Praying with the Writings as part of the Praying with the Bible series. Today I wanted to talk about First Chronicles 14, specifically verses 9 through 17. There's some prayer in there. And so this is a passage that David was the Philistines were coming up against David as he had just become king, and so he's getting ready to go out and fight them for the gajillionth time, and he prays before he does. And so it's two iterations of this where they come, he prays, God says, yep, go fight them, and David goes and does, and he defeats them. And then they come back again. He prays again. God says, hey, I want you to attack this way, and I'm going to send my army in front of you and defeat them before you even get there, and then you come and finish them off. It's a very, very, very similar passage to something we see in Second Samuel chapter 15. In chapter 5, 2 Samuel chapter 5, where the exact same stories recount. It's almost exactly the same wording. It's very, very similar. What I thought was interesting, though, is where that little story is placed among the story of David. So, in Second Samuel, when we have the story of David from that perspective, there's the story of David trying to move the ark into Jerusalem, and it's on a cart, and an ox, trips or whatever. The cart stumbles, and the ark almost falls off, and a man reaches out his hand and just tries to catch the ark so it doesn't fall. And fire shoots out of the ark and kills that guy. And you're kind of reading it like, what in the world is that all about? And David looks at it and is like, what in the world, God? Why would you do this? He actually gets mad at God. Um, and so he decides, we'll just leave it here. And then a few months later, he tries again. Everything goes great, and the ark comes into Jerusalem. Here in First Chronicles, though, that story gets broken up. So you've got that story of it not going well moving the ark, and then you've got the story of when it finally does go well. But in between is where you've got this story of the Philistines coming in battle and David praying, which I thought was really interesting because in the book Praying with the Former Prophets, where I talk about Second Samuel, I actually have a chapter, a section where I put in verse whatever point 5. So I say there's a missing verse in between here and here where it seems like David must have been spending time in prayer and in the Torah between that disastrous moving of the ark and the successful one later, because he approaches it differently the second time. He has a very different outcome the second time, and so I'd made the argument there must be something different going on between these two passages, or between these two attempts. And I think David really just sat down with his Torah and figured out that he was doing it wrong, is what had originally been wrong with the first attempt. What's interesting is here in First Chronicles, where you get that same story, it actually tells you that's what David did. So he reflected on the Torah and found, hey, that's not how you're supposed to move an ark. You don't put it on a cart behind a disgusting ox that's pooping and kicking up dirt and stuff like that. That's not how you move an ark. You move the ark with the appropriate priests, and they would have special poles for carrying it, and they'd carry it on their shoulders with these poles, and there was procession and all sorts of things that were supposed to go along with it that just weren't being done that first time. So he did end up reflecting on Torah. But the other thing is it puts the story of David praying when the Philistines are coming right in there. Um, and so what I'd talked about when I was writing about Second Samuel was that why would David feel like he needs to pray about this? He's a very, very accomplished warrior and military leader. He's been destroying the Philistines left and right. He's been fighting them and winning, fighting, winning, fighting, winning, fighting, winning. And then all of a sudden he's going to fight them and he prays. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, I suppose if I was going to go to battle or to war, I would pray, but to recount that seemed strange. And what I talked about is, he didn't want to do anything uh, without praying and without having God in the midst of it. And I think that really ties this whole picture together of he was kind of trivial with moving the ark, and someone ended up dying from it. Ended up being a terrible, terrible disaster when they tried to move the ark, when he was like, yeah, let's just load it up on a cart and let's get moving. Um, because he felt like he was doing a good thing. He was bringing the ark into his city, which, I mean, of course God would bless that. And so it seems like maybe he wasn't prayerful about that, because he certainly didn't do it the way that God had commanded that the ark be moved. And then so then we've got this passage right next to it in Chronicles where it shows that maybe David learned his lesson from that. That's why he's praying in these battle scenes where one might think like, hey, God's promised to destroy the Philistines, he's promised to bless my army. Let's just go and we'll beat them like we always do. But no, he wasn't going to risk that again. He wasn't going to approach even something that seemed like a slam dunk for him. He wasn't going to approach that without prayer. And so he ended up being prayerful right there in the middle. He consulted the Torah and things ended up working out. And so it was one of those instances where we've already talked about the prayer, or at least I've already written about it. Um, and uh, the story's almost identical. There's not a whole lot of difference in the way that the prayers themselves or even the battles are presented. But the big difference is the way that it's tied into the story, is that it's able to comment back and forth with the two parallel accounts. So I thought that was really interesting and wanted to share that. Overall, though, I think what it really ties back to is just, what are we praying about? And what are we taking for granted? I think a lot of us think, oh, well, I'm going to go do this for God, because that's what you do for God. These are the types of things that when you want to be obedient to God, you do these types of things. And so we just go do them. We don't really ask, like, God, is this what I'm doing? Is this when you want me to be doing it or how you want me to be doing it? We just do the things that Christians do. And so I think that's something that we need to be cognizant of, is we are called to seek after God. There's no things we're supposed to be doing other than seeking him. He's going to call us to specific things, but there's no blanket like every Christian should this, that, or the other. It's we're supposed to seek him and be obedient to him, and whatever that looks like, that's what it looks like. And so that prayerfulness in the everyday, the prayerfulness in the mundane, and the things that seem obvious, those sorts of things. So I wanted to call us to that in this passage. I think it's really calling us to be prayerful in those things. So that's what I wrote about for First Chronicles chapter 14. I hope it was a blessing. Stay tuned, and I'll bring more prayers from the writings. Thanks, guys.